Hello ladies and gentlemen. Recently there has been a pretty heavy discussion about infinite loops in honkaistarrail, which we will assume is merely a random academic inquiry rather than any sort of hallucination the community has. Infinite loops are something I've covered in this channel a grand total of 2 times and only notating a specific one. So I thought what better time would there be to create an educational video focused around every type of infinite loops, including those that are actually possible to do right now without any cheating or data manipulation, ones that have the potential to exist because of one unit, and other loops that Starrail managed to close with seemingly useless clauses that stopped it. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. First, let's discuss the loops that are already in the game. You can perform these in the live server given specific conditions and specific units. The characters are working 100% as intended and have been in the game ever since 1.x. The first unit is Seele. This was only really possible due to Seele's Nova Flare. Previously, Seele couldn't make a loop but got close with 80% action advance every turn. Currently, the Seele loop involves using basic attack to kill an enemy. This will give her an extra turn. But because of her Nova Flare, she does an extra skill to another enemy. If this extra skill can kill an enemy, Seele now has 2 extra turns from Resurgence. Seele can use basic attacks for each of those extra turns, then use her ult to kill and gain another extra turn. You can use basic attack again for a total of 4 basic attacks. Because of Seele's major trace, her basic attack will advance her by 20%. 4 basic attacks will give you an 80% action advance, and if Seele has the win set for an extra 20%, you will be able to do a full 100% action advance, allowing Seele's next turn to occur with 0 AV difference from the previous turn, and then you can do it all over again. And because Seele's max energy is so low, you can do her ult with this setup every single turn, making it a true infinite loop. The next infinite loop is Himeko. Himeko is a double restriction. The loop works because of Himeko's follow-up attack. If Himeko can break enough toughness bars while using her follow-up attack, she will gain charge from those toughness bars. Usually, Himeko will stop doing follow-up attacks until the enemy or allies do something. But if an enemy dies, Himeko will trigger her follow-up attack again and repeat the process. This chainsaw of death is very strong, and because of the team structure required to do this is Break, it's one of the safest sustainless 40k zero cycle teams in pure fiction. It's been in the game for a pretty long time now, even back in the days of 1.x. But of course, just like Seele, it's even worse actually. Himeko's loop has its restrictions. In general, the active loops right now in the game are environment based and easily controlled by power creep. Remove fire weakness and Himeko mains will salivate for Dahlia E2 or other break eidolons. Spike the HP high enough and Seele mains will pull for more sparkle eidolons. The gambling table wins with these infinite loops, so it's safe to say they really don't care about it. It is interesting that these consistent loops are only available for 1.x characters. They very well could have realized their mistakes because there hasn't been true infinite loops to this caliber ever since 1.x, I guess, just to be on the safer side. Now we move on to the next type of loops, enemy loops. These are loops that aren't because of the characters but enemy mechanics. Good timing for this video because one of them you can experience right now. Apocalyptic Shadow Flame Reaver will enter a phase where he summons clones. One of these clones will give you an extra turn when you kill them. And if you kill enough clones, well, you get the extra turn clones back again. And yes, this basically gives you the opportunity to make every character feel like Seele, which has some very unfortunate consequences in the form of players easily being able to do an effective zero cycle once the loop is set up. This is one of the most accessible loops in terms of how many units can actually do it. Of course, just like the other active loops, it is subject to HP inflation, so not everybody can do it in practice. On paper you could though. There's also another one, but only for one specific character. Apocalyptic Shadow's Hoolay versus Kaslana. Because of Hoolay's 1v1 mechanic in Apocalyptic Shadow and Finon's counter, Hoolay will keep advancing Finon to 0 AV, and Finon advances Hoolay to 0 AV. Even if Hoolay's Enrage mechanic expires, Finon can advance the wolves to kill with his counter and force Hoolay to a 1v1 and start the thing all over again, until Hoolay is eventually broken and dies. The only resource here that can can break the loop is Final's ult expiring, but now that Cyrene exists, this is now a true infinite loop. Unfortunately, Hoolay has not returned in Apocalyptic Shadow since Cyrene's release, so we haven't actually experienced the true version of this loop, and it does rely on enemy HP being low enough still. But a strong enough Kaslana will definitely be able to do this loop once Hoolay rolls around again. So that's all of the types of loops in the game currently. There are definitely more loops that exist, but these are just the strongest examples that I can come up with. Now then, let's talk about loops that could have existed. Closed loops. Closed loops kinda explain what seems like strange design choices in characters. Let's start with a simple one with Archer. Archer's skill has a limit of 5 uses before automatically passing his turn, unless you use Reaver of course, and you could probably get up to 7. But why does this limit exist when we'll never have infinite SP anyway? Actually, we were very close to getting one in endgame. On 3.2 Pure Fiction, there was a blessing that negated any skill point used during Surging Grit. If Archer didn't have this limit, and they decided to rerun this blessing in Pure Fiction, Archer will easily zero cycle it with the worst builds man could imagine. In the future updates, there would have also been infinite loops in Simulated Universe or Currency Wars had Archer not have a skill use limit. Second is Robin. Robin can't use her ult during Concerto. The simple reason why is because at some point with enough energy regeneration units, Robin teams will revolve around the strategy where funneling all energy to Robin every turn will result in a team-wide AA to keep going forever. Especially now because Robin's max energy isn't that high with current energy batteries focusing on her. It would be a very interesting playstyle though, but probably for the best that Robin's energy is locked this way. Next is Castorice's Newbud. There is a reason why her needed Newbud is weirdly based on an account's equilibrium level. Because if Newbud was based on the team's cumulative level or their max HP, accounts with level 1 characters would have utterly broken the game. Due to the lower max HP, Castorice needs to heal very little to get her ult back up due to her trace. And say you have a powerful healer that doesn't need levels to function, and heals the entire party to full when Pollux does the final hit, with enough memo sprites, you have an infinite Castorice ult loop. These loops were all forcefully closed by limitations that don't seem that important. You can also consider weird energy breakpoints as to why some units can't have an infinite loop. There's a good reason why there isn't many energy sets like Thief, because even buffing it a slight amount can create Argenti or Kafka ultimate loops for example. There's a good reason they haven't Bankrupt tutorial and energy gain for the same reasons. Same with DDD and passkey being limited in their application. But overall, these are closed loops that have no way of happening ever again. Future unit designs can still loop, but for these units like Robin, Castorice, and Archer, these loops are no longer possible. So, you've probably been waiting for this the entire video. Let's talk about the spiciest loops. Open loops, aka ticking time bombs. Open loops are loops that already have one piece of the puzzle in the game that cannot be taken back. Therefore, new characters that Hoyoverse releases can run into an infinite loop because of these very specific units already in the game. Because of this, certain unit designs are off limits because of their interaction with a previously released character. The following examples can explain why some newer characters have restrictions that do not make an impact outside of preventing an infinite loop. The first is Bronya. I've already explained hers in 2 separate videos, but to give you a quick summary, Bronya's open loop is a very straightforward action advance loop. Suppose there is a new Harmony unit that can also advance units by 100% like Bronya, with no further drawbacks or restrictions. If you put Bronya and this unit in the same team, you simply use skill on each other infinitely. To create damage with this loop, you can have DDD on the new unit or RMC in the sidelines. With enough DDD procs or mem charges, the DPS can act and gain energy for themselves and deal damage. It is a very painstaking process, but theoretically speaking, if you can set this loop up, no matter how much HP inflation there is in Star Rail, you will clear the same amount of AV each time in every endgame mode. Additionally, since the only required slots are Bronya, the new unit, and RMC or another buffer, pulling a new DPS can make the process faster and the team scales with them. It is an utterly broken combo. This is the reason why Sparkle doesn't have a no-holds-barred 100% action advance. This is why Sunday is not allowed to pull up harmonies. This is why Cyrene limits it to Anoxa and isn't spammable. Certain designs like Bronya's single target advance are balanced around the idea that Bronya might loop with them, which hasn't been bothering them so far in creating unique action advancers. So the game is in a pretty good state in avoiding Bronya loops, but nonetheless, it is a pit that they can't ever run into. The next open loop involves RMC in isolation. There is a certain limit in which characters can no longer generate a certain amount of energy very rapidly. Due to RMC's mem charge mechanic, no team can ever generate 1000 energy team-wide in a very accessible manner. Otherwise, mem will gain full charge each time and just keep looping a desirable turn to keep this going. Mechanics like this aren't actually far behind. Saber can possibly do it but is lacking the infrastructure of a fast energy generator for her. Sunday is simply not quick enough to enforce a loop like this. You can see the safeguarding put on Saber's kit with her fake energy mechanic called Core Resonance. That part of Saber's design is to make her energy gain much more bursty to prevent these outright loops. The concept remains the same though. Because of RMC's existence, a team can no longer generate 1000 energy very consistently and must be managed through high burst gains like Saber's. Even then, Saber still has a chance to loop with RMC given the right new character. There are other open loops that are much more extreme. Fei Xiao's method of energy gain is ripe for the possibility of an infinite loop, but it's a very extreme amount of attacks needed that is very far away from what we have, and designing a unit to avoid it but still enforce power creep is pretty simple. Castorice can actually still infinite loop with an extremely potent healer, but it seems pretty far off to worry about. There's also mechanics like Mortenox Blade, Acheron, Jade, Ceridra, and March to the Hunt that could lead to loops, but are easily avoidable compared to what we have already discussed. Though Mortenox Blade is really special due to needing the least amount of attacks to do a follow-up attack. He's much closer to being a loop unit than someone like Fei Xiao, for example. So, with all of these discussions on loops, would the game be doomed if an infinite loop somehow made it to the live server? Well, no. First of all, Hoyo has been known to shortly patch out unintended interaction, though with very small mechanical changes. For example, Cyrene's Ode to Law for Ceridra being able to stack was easily patched out early on, and functionally it wasn't that much of a change anyway. But if the change was incredibly drastic, like removing half of a major trace's function altogether, it's going to be much more difficult to get rid of. But we haven't seen that yet in HSR or any of the other games that Hoyo has, so who knows how Hoyo will act with this type of situation. Assuming that either the player base or just out of Hoyo's own discretion that the loop was left alone, then, well, the loop itself might be something Hoyo can control and is perfectly fine. Technically speaking, Himeko and Seele's infinite loops was managed by simply rising HP and toughness, so depending on the nature of the loop, Hoyo wouldn't really care about it. But assuming Hoyo stepped into the actual dangerous open loops like Bronya or RMC, there are still ways around it. To shut down both of these types of loops, it's as simple as making a debuff that reduces action advance effects by like 10% or something. Or let's say they add enemies that action advance themselves after enough time and start to kill you like in Simulated Universe. Or just lowering ERR by an insignificant amount to anyone else but kills an infinite RMC loop. Or, in a very controversial move, nerf a unit like RMC to prevent a loop but also might affect their other team's performances. If there is a loop in HSR, there are very simple ways to kill it that Hoyo can do very legally, but honestly, that's too much work for them. Adding new enemies just to counter loops isn't a worthwhile solution. Adding a death timer like in Simulated Universe doesn't really help anybody. The last time they nerfed a unit 1 year after release, they got threatened by the Chinese community with a possible lawsuit. So the better choice is to simply make sure that no infinite loops exist in the first place, or at least ones that they can't control. So I guess to close this video, as time passes, Hoyo makes mistakes that can stifle future designs in the form of characters. As much as I call Hoyo creatively bankrupt in how units are so boring, when they do make interesting kits like Mortenox Blade and RMC, they seem to run into mistakes and allow future kits to run into disastrous infinite loops. It really is a matter of seeing how much Hoyo can bend this game to keep rehashing certain gimmicks with better numbers to make them sell better, and eventually Hoyo pushes a little too far and designs an infinite loop. These design bottlenecks are probably why we never see creativity in individual kits in HSR, and we often see it sold as whole teams instead to prevent over-designed singular units. It's kinda their fault, which is why I'm not very sympathetic about it, but yeah, that's all for Infinite Loop. That's all for today. Like, comment, do the algorithm stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you learned something or want other people to know more about loops, then comment down below and, share, I guess. I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Let's all go to the light.